Jay Gruden was relieved of his duties in the midst of his sixth season there, and a beat writer for this team for the Washington Post, Les Carpenter, kind enough to join us for a few minutes here in the Honda Insider Report before the team has a press conference to introduce Bill Callahan as the interim head coach. How are you doing, Les?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. I think we're all better than Jay Gruden, unless you think is this a relief for him? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the end of the world for him. I mean, it was starting to get bad the last few weeks. He's always kind of. You played that clip I saw a second ago of him, saying if the key works. That's kind of been a line he's used a couple times, even late last year. He's always tried to seem very laid back about things and kind of let them come and go as they are, which is probably a pretty good way to handle being coach of the Redskins. But I would say that I think it's a bit of a relief the way things were coming down the last few days. It had gotten ugly.
So did it start with the drafting of Dwayne Haskins? I had Joel Klatt of Fox Sports a couple Fridays ago just asking him if he was surprised that Haskins had yet to start because he and I worked together at the draft and he was evaluating all the quarterbacks then. And his response was, well, the room was split when Haskins was drafted and there's still a rift with the team. And this seems to be the final throes of all of that, Les.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I think the final throws are more 0-5. No, Jay did not prefer to have Dwayne Haskins. That was not his quarterback. I don't know how much he necessarily didn't want him as much as he didn't want a guy with 14 starts. He wanted someone with a little more experience, someone who could walk in and kind of fit in their offense better if they had to play him right away. And if you're going to take a guy in the first round, you're going to play him right away. So I think more that was Jay's hesitation. I don't know that necessarily the ownership was down on him because of that, or he was down on them because of that. I think this had been kind of coming since Alex Smith got hurt. Alex kind of held a lot together here, and once he was down, suddenly then they're running in quarterbacks off the street. At the same time, they went through two sets of starting guards. I mean, it just all kind of snowballed from there. And then, in the offseason, Snyder brought in several established defensive coordinators to meet with the current defensive coordinator and Jay to kind of decide, well, what can we do here on the defense? The subtext of that being, well, maybe one of these guys would replace the current defensive coordinator. So I can't believe that sat well with Jay. I think the writing was on the wall that this wasn't going to last much longer anyway, unless something miraculous happened here.
Okay, so Les Carpenter, the Washington Post here in the Honda Insider Report. And while we're in, the weeds of Haskins here, does that all of this give credence to Dave Gettleman up in New Jersey, where he said that Daniel Jones, in his mind, definitely would not have been available had the Giants waited to pick 17, that you think that's the quarterback that Gruden would have been pounding the table for?
I think Gruden would have been pounding the table for him, yes. Whether they would have chosen him is another question, and that gets back to what we were talking about before. But, yeah, absolutely. I think he's a guy that a lot of teams liked. More and more I kind of ask around the league, I kind of get the sense that teams had very high grades on him, in part because he was a longtime starter at Duke. He worked with David Cutcliffe. Now, also, I think some of the things he does as a quarterback kind of match what a lot of the systems are in the NFL today. So it could be a very good fit. Haskins probably is a little more of a project. Just because he's raw doesn't mean he couldn't be a really good NFL quarterback. It just means that there's more development there.
So then what does it mean for Haskins? Do you think at 1 o'clock Eastern time for this press conference, we're going to hear Haskins is named as the starter against the Miami Dolphins?
I would doubt that right now. Right, as of now, only Bruce Allen is listed as the speaker at the press conference. I don't know if Bill Callahan will be there. If they do name a quarterback, I'm going to guess it would be more like on Wednesday. And we'll have to see. They have an awkward situation with Colt McCoy finally having come back from injury. He does know the offense, or can't change the offense that much. But at this point, when you're 0-5 and you have a Dwayne Haskins, I would think you would want to use him. And so if he doesn't play now, I assume he's going to have to play fairly soon.
Well, you mentioned Bruce Allen's name, Les. I'm mandated to ask you the question I think all Washington Redskins fans want me to ask. Bruce has been nothing but nice and kind to me since I've ever met him at the first owners meeting way back in the day in 2003, and that was before his 10-year run with Washington that has been just nothing short of a disappointment. How does he remain in his gig, Les?
Well, he has a lot of responsibilities here. And so I think Dan Snyder's very tied to Bruce Allen. Probably one of his biggest things beyond sort of overseeing the football operations is trying to get a new stadium here. And they're trying very hard to maybe go back to the old RFK site in D.C. And there's a lot of loopholes that kind of, I don't know what the right word here is to say, but there's a lot of issues because it's federal park land that have to be navigated. And so Bruce is sort of in charge of the stadium push. I think there's, obviously the business side of the team he's in charge of as well. So I don't know that necessarily you would just kick him out of here. I don't know that that's Dan's mindset right now.
Okay, so now the name Lincoln Riley's already all over the place, Les. What do you think?
I think you start throwing out all the names. Part of the reason to do this, and I was told initially that, going back to the summer, that Dan Snyder was impatient and, basically that Jay had 4 losses early in the season. So kind of the New York game last week was sort of the target that, at least was in my mind, and I think in some of the organization, as to when Dan would do this. So one of the thoughts was, if you fire your coach early, then you're in kind of the lead for the next guys. I don't know if they would go for a college coach or not. Another name to at least consider if he's interested is Nick Saban, because they have a fondness for Alabama players. They have several Alabama players here. So, those are at least 2 college names that I think you have to at least look at, as well as some professional names. Don't ignore the name Greg Williams, who was here as a defensive coordinator before. I think that could be a possibility on the table as well as some other current pro head coaches or former head coaches and assistants.
And then there's another guy out here working on Fox doing college football, for whom Dwayne Haskins threw 50 touchdowns last year, in Urban Meyer. Are you hearing that name too, Les?
I have not heard any college names beyond a couple that we talked about, but that's not necessarily. They're just getting started in this process. This came quickly. My sense of it is I don't think a decision was made until late last night or early this morning. So I think this is still Jay didn't find out that he was going to even be meeting these guys until about sometime late last night, and was called in for a 5 a.m. Meeting. So who knows? I think they're still putting their list together.
All right, last one for you, Les Carpenter, Washington Post. You've been covering this team for a couple of years now, and the question is the Jay Gruden era, if you will, 5+ seasons. Here lies Jay Gruden's Redskins head coaching tenure. The eulogy would be what?
The eulogy would be he's a bright offensive mind who came in and had some early success, and in many ways was derailed by injuries and bad luck. Now, he had that much to do with luck. Sometimes, you always control your own luck. Obviously, the record is his. But when you bring in a franchise quarterback like Alex Smith and you think you have him for 5 years and suddenly he goes down, and when you have, I think, 23 players ending the season on IR the last 2 years, each year they had 23 players, and this year they're already at 10, and there's a couple other candidates sitting out there for that. In some ways it's incomplete. He was never fully with his weapons the last 3 or 4 years, and I think once Alex Smith went down, that sort of that was a hole from which they could never dig.
Les, really appreciate it. Thanks for calling in.
Well, thank you.
You got it. That's Les Carpenter, the Washington Post, and the Honda Insider Report.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live, or download the Rich Eisen Show app.